introduce you.
Okay.
I think we have shared this with all the startups earlier, but today let me check with Abbas. Okay, so we have the recording started as all our mentor sessions. So today we have Mr. Arun Raghavan with us. Arun is the co-founder and partner at Arali Ventures. I like the name of the play on the name Arali. So he'll probably start with talking a bit about it. So Arun is the founding partner at Arali Ventures. It's a seed stage enterprise tech-focused VC fund, and he has personally led investments into multiple companies such as Finbox, Unbox, SynLR, Incent AI, where he focuses on fintech, Industry 4.0, and deep tech plays. And prior to Arali, Arun ran SeedX, an advisory firm that helps seed stage startups think through product offering, raising capital, and scaling up. So Arun's career spans technology, business consulting, sustainability, and consumer internet, with roles at IBM, Infosys, Deloitte, and Infosys BPO. So with that, I would like to hand it over to Arun. Arun is going to talk to us about funding in general, and maybe specifically highlight some of the challenges with cybersecurity startups, which are, as we know, it's a deep tech play. So there are obviously market challenges, there are adoption challenges, and definitely funding challenges as well that some of you might have seen. So when you go to early stage VCs or even growth stage VCs like maybe even early ventures, right? The questions that the VCs ask. So those are the points that Arun is going to bring out. He's also going to talk about when should you go to the VC, why should you go to the VC, what are the questions, and so on. So yeah, so instead of me explaining what he'll talk about, let me hand it over to Arun himself. Arun, please take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Rajiv. Thanks. Thanks for the introduction as well. I mean, I largely will try and talk about all the stuff that Rajiv spoke to you about. Let me just give you a context. Right? Whenever I speak to entrepreneurs, what I realize, and this has been over a period of time, we've been doing this for the last just 5-6 years. What we realize is in India there is some amount of misunderstanding or some amount of lack of understanding of how VC operates, right? So typically when I do this, when I have a chat, I try and basically start with saying, getting entrepreneurs to understand what VC is all about, right? Because that will give you a perspective, and I want all of entrepreneurs to go back and think whether it is right for me, because it's an important question in every entrepreneur's journey to figure out whether VC is the right instrument for me. So that's typically where I start, and then once we sort of cover that, I'll try and talk to you about what VCs look for, and whether how typically you should pitch to them, right? So that might be the flow. This is what I had in mind. So I'm happy to basically, if there are any suggestions, any questions that you have, or anything that you want me to cover as well, I can talk about that. Towards the end, I'll also talk probably as a part of the discussion. I'll also try and cover what's the general landscape of say deep tech VC ecosystem in India. What kind of sectors are they investing in? What kind of sectors are still not yet being invested in? So that will be, maybe that will also give you a perspective of what is there in this ecosystem. So this is Rajiv and everyone else. This is broadly what I thought I'll cover. Now, if there's anything else specifically that you want me to talk about, I'm more than happy to discuss that. So let me know, if there's anything that you want me to talk about, let me know and we can. So I'll pause here. If anyone has any suggestions, any things, just let me know, and then we can go.
That sounds good to me. That sounds good to me,
Okay.
Arun. So we can, I mean, like I mentioned, our formats are pretty informal. So we encourage all the startup founders attending to, to break at any point if they have any deeper questions or if they have other things. And we do have a full, close to, 2 hours today. So
Got
please
it.
go.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. So before I start, I just want to ask a quick question. Either Raji, maybe you'll have a better perspective, or even individually. So, how many startups are there today overall attending the call? I just want to go back and get sorry.
Yeah. No, please finish. I'm just counting the number of attendees.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. No, the reason I'm asking is I want to go and try and find out the mix of what's the stage and stuff like that. That's the reason why.
So looks like there are about 8 startups
Got it.
joining.
That's fine. Yeah.
And we can go around the room if you want.
Yeah, no, that's fine. 8 startups, and relatively out of the 8, what stage are they in? Pre-revenues, early revenues, or say decent amount of traction now looking to scale. What kind of is there any breakup that we can give you of the 8?
I would say it's a mix, but I think it's
Okay.
best coming from the founders themselves. So let's
Okay.
maybe quickly go around the room, take like 30 seconds for introducing each startup. That'll give you a better idea, right? So if you can have all the founders quickly introduce their startup, the stage they are in, specifically with respect to funding, anything that they can share at this. Go ahead, Bhavin.
Hi Arun. Good morning.
Hi, Bhavin.
Yeah, are you able to hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah. So Arun, my company's name is Progest Solutions. We are a 3-year-old company. We are a LLP based in Mumbai. We have a couple of products that we've launched. Our flagship product called as Pro DMark was launched in December 2017. And we have several customers in the country for that, including some large banks, insurance companies, telcos, healthcare, pharma, etc. So we have a decent traction, primarily in India. We are looking to now expand beyond India, and we are trying to promote our other solutions as well. So we are at that stage right now.
Got it. I'm just taking notes as we speak, but go ahead. Yeah. Thanks, Bhavin. That was useful. Yeah. Bhavin, just one question before I stop. Sorry. Have you raised money or it's been bootstrapped so far?
We are bootstrapped.
Okay, great. Okay.
So good morning. Myself, Dr. Dinesh.
Morning, Dr. Dinesh.
Yeah. Cybersena R&D Private India Limited, based in. Actually, I had got a defense army cyber security experience. So after that, I started a company in Belgaum. So just 6 months before, and right now I am assisting Smart City Belagavi for a cyber security, aspects, as well as cyber crime department of North Karnataka for investigating a few of the criminal cases, especially cyber crime related, and cyber law analyst also I am doing. So few of the insider integrity and copyright violation and all. So cyber law analysis and some investigation I'm doing, along with my regular research and innovation.
Got it.
So this is all about our Cyber Sena. So it started with the defense name only. Cyber Sena means Antarjala Sainikaru. So we are soldiers, IT armies. Yes.
Got it.
Yeah, thank you.
Can we go to the next one?
This is Riaz from Missile Labs. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Can you hear me? Yeah. This is Riaz from Missile Labs.
Yeah, we can hear you.
We started in
Riaz, go ahead.
We started doing yeah. So we started in 2018. Professional services, some of the organization like Dubai Airport and Standard Bank. So we just recently launched our product, which is a web application security platform. It's just launched like August 15th, and we just started with the digital marketing and sales and marketing strategy. We haven't got any customer yet, but we are still working on it. Yeah, that's all from my side. Thank you.
Thanks, Riaz. Yeah.
Hey, hi. My name is Mohit. My startup is Foresight. So we started sometime back recently during COVID scenario. We are in a pre-revenue stage. We are trying to see some tractions. We are talking to a lot of customers and seeing good traction, right? So when I say traction, I mean we have not reached to in order to more from a revenue perspective, but seeing a positive traction from the customers, right?
Got it.
And
Got it.
yeah, that's it.
Got it. Got it. Thanks, Mohit. Yeah, that is useful.
Hello, good morning.
Hello. Yeah, morning.
Hi, my name is Nanda. I'm founder of Digisec 360. We are one and a half year old company, private limited, and we are at early stage. Our focus area is cyber essential services like assessment and awareness. And it's been since last 1 year we have over a dozen of big firms as our customers. But right now we are focusing on our product, which is a cyber essential platform. Which is a comprehensive security solution delivery application. It's a SaaS application. And we are bootstrap. We have not
Got it.
raised any funds so far.
Got
Thank
it.
you.
Got it. Got it. Great. Thanks, Nanda.
Good morning, Nitish. Is it audible?
Yeah, Nitish, it's audible. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm representing Extend Networks. We are developing next generation first line defense to filter out emerging cyber threat. In a given time, there are millions of threat intelligence in terms of indicator of compromise IOC. So our solution will filter out like emerging cyber threat and clean the network at the like software defined perimeter.
Got
So
it.
we are pre-revenue. We are still developing our product.
Got it. Got it. Got it, Nitish. Yeah.
Thank you. That's all from my side.
Thanks, Nitish. Yeah.
Anyone else? Mr. Vallabha or I think the other person dropped out.
Got it.
Okay. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah, that's good enough.
right.
I mean, Landi gives me a perspective of what stage they are in, what stage most of people are in. So okay, so let me just start by saying I just share a deck that I have created, and then that we can use for discussion. The deck is just a backdrop. More than happy to answer questions along the way. So I'll share the deck, and then we can possibly talk about VC investing and basically capital kind of thing, right? So if that's okay, let me just quickly share my screen. Can you see it?
Not yet. I think it's
Just setting it up.
on the way. Yes, you can see
Yes.
it.
Yeah. Is it visible? Do I need to zoom in, or do I need to move to
Yeah, maybe a presentation mode, I think.
presentation mode? Okay, great. Just check if this works, because sometimes I've noticed. Yeah, clearer now, I guess, right?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah. So what I tried at the end of it, at the end of this, if I can give you a perspective of what kind of what is venture capital and what you need to know about it, and if you also have an idea of how to tailor your presentation, your pitch, to basically approach them, then I think that will probably broadly serve the purpose. And then we can specifically talk about how the landscape is for cybersecurity. So at first, I'll try and cover what first-time founders need to know about this, right? Because it's a slightly misunderstood asset class. It's not a very it's also a very limited asset class. It's not easily available. So that's why it's important to understand what it is all about. So that's what I'll try and cover first. So if you look at it, so the key important reason why you need to understand is you need to basically know how it works, and therefore you also need to know whether it is the right kind of instrument for you, right? Uh, Typically, what happens is they only say 5% of the companies that get funded by VC, but it doesn't mean that you can't build a large, profitable, sustainable business without VC money. You know, you can. I mean, take all the examples of the big service companies that we have in India. I mean, take the Infosys of the world, take the TCS of the world. They're not $1 or 1 rupee of VC capital that they have raised, and all of them are large companies today. So it's not necessary that you need VC capital to go back and build out a business. Having said that, you need to make a call. It's a multiple trade-offs that you have, and then you need to make a call saying whether this is the thing that you want to do. So it's very important to understand what that capital is all about. And once you decided, we'll also talk about how do you go about raising it, right? How do you go about raising VC capital? What are the things that you should do? What are things you should be careful about? And then lastly, I have one section on resources, largely resources that you can go back and look at on the web. I'll share some links with you, a lot of blogs, a lot of stuff that's already been written about VC and stuff like that. It might be useful for you, right? So that's largely what I'll cover. We go to the next. Yeah. So if you look at it in the last if this was say 10 years ago, the amount of options that you had for basically building out a business was very limited. All you had was basically you had to bootstrap, funded through revenues, and then maybe you could have taken loans or taken some money from your network and try and build it. I mean, there's stories of how the Infosys founders mortgage their own personal money to basically go out and build it. So that's largely been how it has been, say 10 years ago or even before that. But in the last, in fact, more than the last 5 to 6 years, there's been a proliferation of instruments, right, which can help entrepreneurs. I mean, entrepreneurs can use these instruments to basically leverage and scale their business. So obviously, bootstrapping is there. You bootstrap it, you fund it through revenues. You raise the next one is you raise it from your friends, immediate network. And there's a saying, right? I mean, 3Fs is the typical saying in VC world. Friends, family, and fools who will actually invest at the stage of an idea, kind of thing. In fact, Arali is one of those fools. Is what I'd like to say. We typically invest very early, but we'll come to that. Then nowadays you have a lot of angel networks. You have angel investors. You have networks of angels, which typically act as a group and invest. Then you have syndicates. I mean, you have platforms where if you have an interested angel, the angel will basically put it up on a platform, and there are people who follow him on a platform, and they will invest along with him. So it's like a group of people again investing. And then you have accelerator programs. I mean, Rajiv runs this. Rajiv started this great accelerator program. I think it's cybersecurity is one area that we don't have enough of this stuff, and hopefully he can scale it and help a lot more entrepreneurs, right? And then towards the end, you have venture funds. We are again broadly classified into the stage at which they operate. They are seed funds like Arali, which operate really early. And then there are growth funds. Growth funds are typically investing into companies which already have a business model, which already have a product and offering, but they want to scale it either globally or they want to scale it to, say, larger geographies and stuff like that. Then typically that's where growth funds come. And then the growth funds, I mean, towards the end, you also have large. Just give me a second. There's some. Yeah, you have growth. You have larger third-party fund. You have private equity funds, which typically come in really later stage. I mean, people who come into a company just before they're going IPO, for example. You need to scale globally. You're profitable. Your unit economics works. You need to basically go back and scale globally. And you want to achieve some scale before you hit the IPO or you go public. So that's typically where the private equity plays come in. And then obviously you have strategics. A lot of the companies have what you call strategic venture capital arms. So, for example, a lot of cybersecurity companies will have a venture capital arm that will invest. right? So those again invest into companies with either a strategic intention or with a purely financial intention. So these are the multiple sources of capital that are there today for you. I'm not even talking about say debt kind of capital. I'm only talking about equity capital. And debt, obviously, you have bank loans and you have multiple other sources, right? So given all of this, see what typically you need to understand is the motivation for all of these different players and return expectations are very different, right? And that's very important to understand as an entrepreneur. For example, friends and family and the immediate network. Return expectation is there. I mean, not that it is not there, but the return expectation is probably muted. I mean, they want you to be successful. They want you to be be able to build a good business, and they're not looking at, okay, can I return say 10x in the next 5 years, right? And they're not also typically first about how soon you can return the capital. If you say it will take 20 years, but 20 years you can go back and make a large company their shareholders, they'll be more than happy. Whereas some of the angel networks, accelerators have a different motivation. Venture funds have a different return expectation. So all of these are important for you to understand in terms of how it works, right? And what also happens is investor sophistication as you go along this chain, right? Your investor sophistication, the amount of maturity they need from a company also increases as you go along. So, I mean, you can raise money from your friends and family without anything, right? But with an angel, you'll have to have an idea, you'll have to have some credibility, you'll have to have some credibility saying you can build out what you're talking about, right? You might have to show some initial POCs and stuff like that. Similarly, with seed funds. And then growth funds and all, you'll have to have a team, you'll have to have the ability to, you'll have to show the ability to go back, that you can execute, you can scale the business. And similarly with strategics, right? So the sophistication and what they require increases as you go along the chain. So these are broadly differences. I'll pause here. If there are any specific questions on these, more than happy to talk about. Otherwise, I'll move on. Just interrupt me if you have any question. Let this not be a monologue kind of thing. Otherwise, especially in a Zoom kind of scenario, you don't get most of the time you don't get any feedback on what people are thinking. So I'll pause. Happy to chat about any specific aspects, or if not, I can go on.
Yeah, I have one question. I'm Vallabh Desai here.
Yes, Mr. Vallabh. Yes, Mr. Vallabh. Yeah.
My mic was not working initially, so I was not able to introduce myself.
Yeah.
It's a startup company just started 6 months back. In the month of January, we started. It's a private limited company, and already we have started generating a revenue. Just we are looking at funding.
Right.
Okay. If possible, in an initial stage, can we take these fundings?
Right. Yeah. I will. Okay. I see where your what your question is. I will try and discuss that as we go through the presentation. I'm covering that. But it's whether you can take funding or not is largely subject to what is your ambition for the business and what kind of business you want to build, right? So if you want to say that you are happy to build, say for example, a 50-100 crore business in the next say 5-10 years, right? Okay. And at a say 30% profitability thing, and you are happy with that, and that basically means that at the end of the 10th year or 7th year, maybe at 30% profitability, 100 crore business, you're basically taking 30 crores home as the promoter team, who are the promoters, right? If you're happy with that, then there's a different model. But if you want to build out in the same time period, you want to build out a 100 million, just a 700 crore, 800 crore business, be valued at say 10 times more, right? Then it's a different call. So it's a function of what your ambition is and what kind of business, what is the kind of product, does it have the potential to basically do that as well. So there are two aspects. One is what you want to do with the business, and does it have the intrinsic capability to be that kind of business.
Okay. Is it possible without product also, only for the service company can take a funding?
You can, but it is more difficult because I'll tell you why. I mean, it is largely saying if you look at, let me take this example of large service companies in India. right? If you look at Infosys, for example, it took them 17 years to list, right? List an IPO. And the reason why you're talking about listing an IPO is because the guy, suppose you take money from someone today, right? The ideal exit for them is when you go public and they sell out their shares, correct? Right, that could be one, right? And the other option is basically you basically have a mechanism by which they invest something today. As soon as you get some profits, you start sharing profits with them, right? That in India is not very common, right? But the most common way in which this works is you take in money, and then when you either do an IPO or when you exit, their shares are so valuable, they exit and they get a big return. But the time period for that is very, very, I mean, in India, first of all, listing is very difficult. So it takes a long period. Now, so with a long period, the risk also gets significantly more. So people will go back and say, is this really worth it? Because at the end of the day, if a purely financial perspective, they will look at it saying, if I invest in stock market, I might get the same amount of return.
Yeah, that's true.
Correct. So that's the thing. Anyway, we will talk about more detail. I'm covering this, right?
Okay.
So I'll just specifically with VC, and if you look at VC, right, the way this works, the way this thing works is we raise money. The VCs, I mean, typically don't have, it is not their own money, right? They're investing someone else's money. At the end of it, they're also financial managers, right? But they raise money with the expectation, and they raise money from various sources. They raise money from individuals, from high net worth individuals, from family offices that are constructed to manage investments of, say, large families, and from corporates, banks, all of these guys, right? And they raise money to basically say, with the expectation of saying, I will give you outsized returns, right? So they take, for example, I just give an example. I raise 100 crores with the objective of saying, I will give you 4x of 100 crores, right, in 5 years, right? That is the promise on which they raise capital. Now, so and it's important. So if you need to basically invest 100 crores and make it 400 crores in 4 years, right? Then obviously it follows that the kind of businesses they invest in is that will drive the kind of businesses they invest in. So that's typically the kind of money that is in VC, right? So just take an example.
Arun,
Sorry,
a
yeah.
small question here, Mohit.
Yeah.
The investors are, as you rightly said, right? They have some vision, and then they are investing with making that money big money, right?
Correct.
But that's the
Correct.
expectation, right? But
Correct.
in
Correct.
reality, just wanted to understand more from a stat perspective, and more from what is the outcome, right? So VC has invested a lot of money in startups, right? And is that model was successful? What is the percentage? And if the returns are not expected, not aligned with the expectation, suppose 100 crore was invested, and because of XYZ reason, the startup was not able to flourish, and the money is, let's say, still 100 crore, right? Or somewhere in that range, right? So how that is taken care, and what is the current landscape when it comes to startups in India, more from VC perspective, and the kind of returns they are getting? Is it a fruitful model from their side, and more from the startups as well?
Got it. Got it. Yeah, good question. So if you look at it overall, I'll give you overall numbers and then I'll talk about. So if you look at it overall, around 100 billion is the overall capital of that is there, uh, managed by VCs globally. And this numbers change depending upon how you classify VC. But 100 billion is the overall capital that's managed by the venture capital industry. That's typically what you call the AUM of the venture capital industry. Now, typically on a global basis, right? If you look at returns over the past, say, 2-3 decades, the average returns have been around, say, 2 point some x, 2.3x, 2.4x of invested capital within a period of say 6 to 7 years, right? So while it is not hitting 4x, right, the average is basically around 2 points of x. Now, having said that, because it's an average, there are guys who are on the top end. There are guys who have consistently returned, say, 4x, 5x on invested capital. There are guys who return typically 1x or even lower on invested capital. So overall, I think as a model, it has been fairly successful. I mean, you take all the products that you typically use today. Take Google of the world, take Facebooks of the world, take WhatsApp, take say even cybersecurity, take CrowdStrike, take Semantic, name any big company, right? At least the newer generation companies. All of them are there today because they have basically used VC money to scale, right? And so to that extent, it has helped significantly building large companies. No doubt about that. Having said that, there obviously in this industry there are failures and there are success as well. The industry is not so much worried about capital as about failures as much as I'll come to that in the next slide. They are more than happy for 8 companies to fail as long as 2 can return. As a VC, that's typically what they look for, right? So that's the nature of the industry. So if you ask me a question, has it been a successful thing? Yes, right. It's overall been a very good asset class, and it's an asset class that's growing. I mean, you had SoftBank come in and create a parallel 100 billion AUM kind of fund. Not that they did very well, but as an interest asset class going. And also the reason for this is if you look at capital today, right, globally, there's a cap on what kind of returns capital can get in any other asset classes, right? For example, equity is capped, your debt is capped, multiple things are actually already capped. So people are looking for some exposure to a high risk, high return kind of asset class. Does that answer your question?
The only part which is which probably you might cover in the presentation is if the expectations are not met, right, then what are the repercussions on the startup, on the VCs, and how that scenario is handled? Because all the founders, right, when they, I mean, when they start looking VC kind of model, somewhere at the back of their mind, this is one of the fundamental question: is what if things don't get progress in a right manner because of XYZ reason, right? It could be a political reason, it could be COVID kind of scenario, anything, right? What are the repercussions and how those things are handled overall?
Got it. Yeah. So I don't specifically have a slide on that, but I can talk to you about how the typical VC thing is structured, right? That's definitely an important point. Let me cover that, right?
Thank
yeah.
Thank
Great.
you so
So this is what I talked about. The expectation is outsized returns. So when you do that, let me just take a few. Let me just explain that with an example, right? That will make it clear, right? So typically, I've raised 100 crore fund. So and I invest. Sorry, just give me. I invest say into 20 companies, right? Into 20 companies, I invest 5 crores each. Now, and 5 crores, I basically take around 10% equity in each of those companies, right? So that's the large math. So 20 companies, each of them are investing 5 crores, and I take basically 10% equity. Now take a scenario. This is a scenario 1 where I have 4 companies. I have sorry, yeah, I have 4 companies that basically give me 4x returns. Is that correct? Yeah. So I have 4 companies that give me 4x returns, and I have 4 companies that give me 3x returns. Sorry. Yeah, 10 and 10. So I have half the companies that give me a 4x return, and I have half the companies that give me a 3x return. That means they grow to some extent, and then either they IPO or whether a larger investor comes in and buys them and stuff like that, right? And if you do the math there, right, 4x basically for my total the 10 companies, it basically becomes 20 crores each, and it becomes 200 crores overall, and 3x for the other 10 companies is 150 crores. But if you add it up, it still doesn't hit the 400 target that the VC is looking at. So if you look at it, I mean, a company that delivers 4x on a normal business to an investor is technically, you would look at it and say, wow, that's a great company, right? But having said that, it doesn't fit into the typical okay, this is a great company for a VC. Whereas you look at the other extreme is let me just move the screen. Yeah, you have one company that returns say 50x of capital, right? One company that returns 30x, and the other 18, the VC money is written off. And I'll come to what it means by written off, but the VC money is written off, right? If you look at that with a 50x and a 30x, and just two companies just returning that kind of multiple, right? The VC is able to hit his target. So that's the nature. So typically, when you look at it, the bets that VC make are saying, can I basically invest in a company that will give me 50x? And that is what drives their thinking. Now, so from the promoter's perspective, you have to go back and think, is that the kind of company you want to build? Right. So this is largely how the VC model is built. Now, going back to your question, so what happens? I mean, we talked about 18 companies not returning any capital at all. So the nature of the so what does that mean? It means that when someone invests into a company, a VC invests into a company, he is basically he'll come in with a particular amount. They will negotiate a particular valuation, and then he will take a percentage of the company. Now, with a percentage of the company, typically comes with some kind of rights. The rights will be typically saying what kind of he'll have a maybe a board observer, right? He'll have some voting rights on what kind of on the board. He'll also have rights which are to do with strategic direction of the company. Say today you're a services company, tomorrow if you take VC money, you will not be allowed to get into retail. Your IT services company, you will not be allowed to get into retail, right? You will not be allowed to basically take in additional money without the VC's approval. You will not be able to go do an IPO, or you will not be able to sell your company without the VC's approval. So anything largely strategic, the direction of the company, you cannot change without the VC's approval. They will also have some amount of oversight on operations. They will monitor you in terms of saying, can you go back and hit the kind of revenue projections you have hit? Can you go back and scale at say 20-30% that you have projected? Can you go back and maybe add your product portfolio? All of that, they will have some oversight. But largely, the operational running is still something that the promoters will manage. Now, what happens if the company fails and both basically the VC and you decide that you have tried everything, and the product is not being successful, and the idea or whatever is not being successful? Then there are many cases in which the VC and the promoter entrepreneur shake hands and says, "Okay, boss, we have done what you've done. Let's close this. Let's close this company. Let's do what's right for employees. Let's see if we can place them out, and that's it. Let's shake hands and let's move on." And that happens in a lot of cases. So even if you look at in India, there are multiple companies that are shut down, right? VC invested companies, and typically in those scenarios, if it's been a good relationship, the entrepreneurs and VC shake hands. There are many cases in which even after shutting down, the VCs have gone back and invested in the entrepreneur on the second inning, right? When he's starting a second company. So in some cases, the companies have been acqui-hired, right? So you realize that you're not going anywhere. The VC helps you basically take your people and get them hired by a larger tech company or whatever. So all of those things happen. So the thought of letting go of control is it's not very black and white, right? So there will be some amount of letting go of control. The best way I say is, if you don't want to, if you want to be totally in control of your business, then don't get an external one, right? But the important thing is to basically it's a balance between how much control you want to let go, and balance that with what is the ambition and how much can you scale the business. So these are the things you have to balance. I'll pause here. It's a very tricky thing, I understand. So I'll pause here and ask if there are any questions. Let me know, and then we can talk.
Hey, Arun.
Yeah.
See,
Yeah, yes. Just one second. One second.
but my experience of the VCs I spoke to, right? All of them I asked, other than investing money, what are the contributions effort you do in terms of like operating, reporting? So I understood here, like most of them investing money and they are looking, but to any of the data options or support. See, I'm not sorry. But what I'm looking here, bootstrap, I'm taking kind of like a support, like a co-founder, right?
Right, right.
So
Correct, correct.
do you think like there are similar that or what would?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for someone like
Get my
that,
question?
yeah, yeah, I got your question. Yeah. So my answer to that is even if any VC says that they're very operationally involved and they can play a co-founder role, don't believe them. Right. At the end of the day, any VC, right, whatever he might say in his sales pitch, and I'm being very upfront and frank here, he is basically a money manager, right? He is managing the money on behalf of some 100 people that he's raised it from, and his job is to basically return multiples of that money back. That's his focus. I mean, that's his day job, and it's not an easy job. I mean, because I typically I don't know. There's a perception that it just people sit back and then deals come to them, right? A VC typically sees around say 1,000 deals to invest in say three, and so that's the typical ratio of basically how many companies get invested in. And obviously, you have to wait for a long time. There are failures on the way and stuff like that. And during all of this period, it's so depending upon the size of the fund, it is not something that's very remunerative. It's only remunerative for the VC at the end of 7 years or 8 years when they actually make money. So just going back to the point, if someone says that they'll be operationally involved, to my this thing, it is not very reasonable because that seems like I mean he has a very different kind of job to do. And if you are looking for someone who will operationally get involved with your marketing, with your this thing, then VC is not the right person for you. You need a co-founder, maybe you need someone who can be an advisor, maybe stuff like that, but not a VC.
Okay.
Yeah. What they might be able to do at some point of time, they can some point of time, if you get VC money, they'll sit on your board. They will help you with strategic directions. They'll help you monitor the business. They'll have rich networks that they can bring to the table. They can basically help you collaborate more with existing companies. They'll have a huge network of clients that you can possibly tap into, and all of that. But again, heavy lifting, actual operational work is something that you will have to do.
I am what they are investing. Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
Exactly. And typically that's a very good point, right? Typically, most VCs, especially at a slightly later stage, will bring in excellent people. I mean, suppose you go to guys who are focused in the US. Typically, that happens a lot more. You go to a guy VC who is basically expert or who focuses on deep tech. He will bring in a, 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 a crack guy who is a great guy in terms of marketing, say, cybersecurity products. Maybe he's been the global head of McAfee, maybe he's been the global head of whatever. And he will bring you the CTO for someone to come and work for you. And all of these guys will come, they'll come for equity, but that kind of help they typically do because they have networks, right? And you can obviously with the VC money you can pay them, so they will ensure that. See, in some ways he's de-risking the capital that is invested in. So they will do all of that. But for him to basically come and do work for you at an early stage is not something that happens.
I got it.
Any other questions? Otherwise, I'll move on. Okay. Just let me go back to this mode. So we talked about what kind of expectations VC have, right? So then, what does it mean for founders? So what are the, so typically what does it translate into? So it translates.
Okay, Arun, I think you've gone on mute.
It has to be such a way that it's very large and expanding. So, is there a way in which, if you say today you're a say security solution for any SME player who wants to basically start, the market is large. I mean, if you look at, if you say even a small retail POS guy, uh, I can go back and help you with security. Then the market suddenly becomes large, right? So that is a primary this thing for a VC evaluation, right? That's something that they look at. Then rapid scaling. So, do you have it in the product and in the team that you can scale the business rapidly, right? And in the previous example, we said 50x returns, right? So 50x is probably one of the outliers. But even if you say 50x return, that means that you're moving from a valuation of, say, whatever the valuation was, to say 2,500 crores valuation. That means you are basically growing from a zero revenue company to around, say, 200, say 250 to 400 crores in the 5-year period. So can you grow that fast, right? Is something that they typically evaluate, right? And again, is the timing right for this business? So, for example, if you look at it, Facebook was not the first social platform, right? They were things before that. Even in India, they were plays before. They were plays which were probably ahead of their time. If you look at, say, digital payments, there were multiple companies before the Paytms of the world came in. But there was an issue with timing. Right? There was an issue with internet. There was an issue with download. There was an issue with multiple other things. Whereas now there seems to be an ability to go back and penetrate faster because the ecosystem around it is there. So, is the timing right? Is one important question that typically they look at, and not easily replicable. So, not easily replicable is typically saying can how easy it is to create a different business. I mean, copy the business and make it as big, right? And not easily replicable. Typically, what I've seen is founders think about it in terms of technology, right? Oh, my technology is great, it's not easily replicable. But that is not typically how we see look at it. Technology is one aspect of it, not easily replicable technology is good. But beyond that, what they look at is what is the mode. It could be the kind of clients that you built, right? And people are using the product. And once you get into an account, especially in B2B, it's difficult to dislodge you unless there's a different this thing. So, what kind of team have you built? What kind of network have you built? Have you built a good sales, good go-to-market team? So, all of these some things becomes not easily replicable. Have you built a network of in your product team? Have you built experts who can basically keep innovating on the product? Right? So to that extent, that is not very easily replicable by some 10 other guys. So all of these are key things that. And the last one, what's your mindset? Like I said in the earlier this thing, right? Are you happy with building a 100 crore business that and it gives you 30% returns year on year, or do you want to build a business that is that's got the potential to be a 700 crore business and then still growing rapidly at 30%, 40% year on year, and go from there? So all of these are important things for founders to think about, because that will decide what it means whether they take VC money or not, right? So one thing that I'd ask you to do, and I think Rajiv, it's an important thing that maybe the part of this incubation session you have chat along with. What's the overall, and it's important to go back and this overall, go back and think about what's the strategy for the business, what's the vision for the business from the promoter's perspective, right? And that will give you a view of whether you should raise VC money at all, or is it some different kind of money that you should raise, right? The other thing that you need to look at is, I mean, is the opportunity cost. Suppose you don't raise capital today, right? Is your product so unique that someone else might do it and then the market will be lost to them, right? So that's an important aspect. So you have to go back and think, is your product so unique that if you don't do it, someone else will do it and you will miss the large opportunity, right? So that's another aspect for you to go back and consider. You should have clarity on it before you go back and raise capital. And then the last one is basically saying, if you decide to raise money as well, you need to be aligned. Ask your VC what's the expectation that they have from the business, right? Sometimes smaller VCs might be okay with you becoming a 100 crore company and exiting at a 500 crore valuation, provided there is no larger VC. Rather than a larger VC who might be ready to put in, say, 40 crores, 50 crores into your business now, but he wants you to basically scale to a 2,500 crore revenue business and valuations beyond that. So you need to understand what's driving the VC, what's the kind of objectives they have, and go from there. Right? If you don't, if that is not aligned, then you're getting into serious trouble. So largely, I'd stop here. The key thing is basically you think about what you want to build, and should you raise that capital at all, and then is the opportunity cost of not raising. Like I said, if you are you going to miss the big opportunity in the market if you don't have capital. And again, your alignment of what kind of VC, what's objective VC, these are things that you should have clarity on before even embarking on a race, right? So I'll pause here. This is largely to do with the kind of asset class it is and what people should consider. Uh, Pause here. If there are any questions, happy to take them. Otherwise, I'll move on. The next part is largely covering how you should pitch to a VC and what are the things that you should consider. Any questions? Great. Rajiv,
No, Arun, I think this is no. I think this is great. I think this really you've answered a lot of the why part and how part, right? Why should you go to VC and
Got it.
how do they evaluate it from their perspective? So I think
Got
this is
it.
fantastic. Yeah.
Got it. Great. Yeah. So we see like anything. Think of it like if you decide to go back and raise. So one point I want to make, right? So like I said, when you start thinking, is VC the right thing for you, or do you need to raise VC at all? Think of it in terms of a 2-year horizon, right? In the next 2 years, you need to raise VC capital. And these things change. For example, I mean, I'll give you an example of a company in Hyderabad, right? They basically, a services company pivoted to a product, kept doing well, and started then shared resources between services and product till sometime the product was able to take care of itself. Then they scaled the product to a large extent, 8 to 10 years. They basically just didn't take any external money and they scaled the product to some extent. And at that point, they realized that they were selling this in a couple of geographies, US and some a little amount of Europe. Then they realized the opportunity was significant. They just had to get into some adjoining areas, and the opportunity was huge. So after 8 years of being a bootstrap company, they went and raised capital. So whether VC is right for you or not is also a function of stage. You can say next 2 years I don't want to raise capital, I'll bootstrap it, and at that point of time I'll go back and evaluate. So that's something that for you to keep in mind. It is not that it is never that you're going to raise VC. If you decide today you're not going to raise, it doesn't mean that you can't change it later. Right? That's important to understand. Now, just once you decided you're going to raise capital, think of it like a ongoing process. Think of it like a process that you would do, just like basically you would go back and either uh, uh, build out a marketing plan, build out a sales plan. Think of it like almost a similar process, right? and you budget for that. Typically, what I've seen is founders not budgeting that kind of time, or not mentally budgeting that kind of time and effort for raising capital, right? And that basically begins to show up badly. So you budget for that plan. If you have 2, 3 co-founders, say one of them will predominantly focus on fundraise, and the other guy picks up this thing, right? So that's very important. You need to set that expectation before. And the structured process typically I think is important. In whatever way, right? You structure it, you plan, do some research on what kind of VCs you want to go into, then and then you organize your story, then you pitch and you come back. Right? So all of that is very important. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, sorry. Yes, sir. And so typically, what I've seen is a lot of founders, lot of entrepreneurs are not slightly cavalier about the process and about how they're raising capital, which actually in the long run, I think it comes back to hurt them only. So it's better to put a structured process, right? The more important thing is also be truthful and be open to yourself, right? I mean, you will get feedback. You all along the way, you will get people who are coming back and saying, you know what, the product is this thing. They'll give you feedback on the product. They'll give you feedback on the team. They'll give you feedback on the business model. All of that. I'm not saying take everything at face value, but if some 10 people are saying something to you, then it probably means there is some truth in it. So be open to yourself. Be this thing about honesty yourself to see. Okay, maybe there is something that you need to go back and look at it. Right. So that's something that that's I think important for people to go about and think about. Right. I'll move to the next slide. This is sorry, tagging for whatever reason. Sorry. Sorry. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. See, do you think it's good to have an exit strategy? I mean, will the investors would look for startups who have exit strategy or?
Yeah. So, see, depends on the stage. Is this Riaz? Riaz, answer the question. Yeah. So, Riaz, see, typically, investors obviously in their mind when they are investing, they have maybe some views of how this can potentially exit, right? But typically at early stage, they don't expect you to have a realistic exit strategy, right? The other aspect of that they know is exits are only meaningful. I mean, even if you have an exit strategy, say you will sell to a larger business, right? You will sell to say a services company, info service. If you look at what VCs understand very well is that someone buying you and what are the criteria they are looking at. So if you just go back and look at the kind of acquisitions that have happened in the Indian tech space, right? All of them have happened for 2-3 strategic reasons, especially the services companies. They happened either for, say, you have access to a customer which is very, very valuable, so I'll buy you, right? Or you have access to a particular set of skills which are very, very meaningful, which are very interesting, and therefore I'll buy you. Or the last case, you are big enough and you have presence in a particular geography, or you have presence, you have something that's complementing my offering, and I'll buy you. So just by it's very rarely happened, especially in services kind of companies, that people buy you for some product offering. It doesn't happen that much, right? So then it becomes a question of say, can you build that out? And that obviously it's something that VCs will think about, but I don't think. First, if you are just going back to the question whether you need to have an exit strategy, I don't think it's necessary. Even if you have, you should go back and evaluate whether it is credible enough. Right? You might say tomorrow Mindtree will buy me, but a VC typically will know that Mindtree has made say 4 acquisitions in the last 15 years, and all of them have been these kind of acquisitions. Whether can you fit in there is a quick judgment he'll make. I'm just giving an example of my time, not that. So that's something that you need to go back and think of.
Okay, yeah, got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Arun.
Great. So the thing about, and I talked about planning, right? Planning for how much you're raising. So typically this is the most important part, right? You basically, and typically people say, you know what, I want to raise $1.5 million, right? But and $1.5 million to do what? No, I want to basically go back and invest in sales, in marketing, in product, and this thing. But typically that's what typically VCs look for there is when you're raising $1.5 million, what are the milestones you want to hit in the next 18 to 20 months? You want to grow from say a zero revenues today to say 10 crores of repeat revenue in the next 10 to 18 months, or you want to hit say 5 crores of revenue in the next 18 months. You want to go back and build out a sales team and start getting 2 crores revenue. So that's very important. So set milestones for the business. Now what I do is work backwards. So if you want to go back and say in the next 18 months you want to have say 10 customers, all of them paying you say 1 crore each, work backward and say what will it take to get 10 customers? Will it take say 10 sales guys? Will it take 5 sales guys in these geographies? How long? All of that. Translate numbers and then say this is my first 18 to 24 months objective, and therefore I will need this kind of capital, right? And typically what we see in most cases is it says founders come back and say, you know what, I have my CA, he's worked out the Excel, I will send it to you, right? It basically doesn't give a lot of confidence to VC. It says ultimately it is your business. You need to know and have a grasp on the numbers and say, okay, I need basically say 3 crores to build out my product and get 5 clients who will pay me say 25 lakhs per month. Whatever be the milestones, right? Set those milestones and help you understand the plan to end level of detail. It should not be something that you don't have a lot of clarity on, right? A well-constructed plan actually speaks a big tick mark for a VC itself. And the plan doesn't have to be complicated. I mean, I've seen plans which are which typically with schedules and with all the kind of financial information that even a CA would you need a CA to read. That's not necessary. All you need is ultimately you're translating your 2-year roadmap into a simple Excel. That's all you need. And if you can do that, that's good enough, right? The other important aspect is right, VCs also typically they would want you to be frugal. I mean, it is not for any other reason, but saying typically come back and say, okay, I've raised VC capital, I'll go back and spend it. The VC is coming in because there's a potential for both you and the VC together to build out a large business. And if he sees that you are basically rewarding yourself before you even have any visibility of that happening, then it's a red flag, right? So frugality anyway it's this thing, because with frugality what happens is you need lesser and lesser capital to grow the business, and when you need lesser and lesser capital, the good thing for the entrepreneurs is you have more and more control over the business, right? If you look at all the companies that are listing today in the US, right? If you just go back and do analysis of how much promoter holds at the time they go back and list an IPO, especially tech companies, you would see that ranging from promoters holding less than say instance of promoters holding less than 5-6% to promoters holding greater than 50-60%. So obviously in a case where you 50-60%, the amount of control you have and the destiny of the company is much more. And that's, you probably achieve that by being frugal upfront rather than being this thing. So that's very important from a planning perspective. And these are broad guidelines of how, what we would look at in terms of a plan, right? Some definite no's, right? Inflated costs, higher than norm salaries, and unrealistic revenue expectations, right? Typically, because these guys see multiple companies, they have a very good view of typically what's achievable, what might not be achievable. And even in different sectors, they'll have a very good view. So if you can say, I'll grow from say 2 clients today to say 100 clients in the next 6 months. It might just this thing alarm bells. Unless you have a justification for how you do it. Right? If you can do that, great. But otherwise, it's not something that resonates very well in a plan. Right? But the other aspect typically is, and this could be saying exits to existing investors. So if you go to a VC and say, hey, I want to raise money and I want to raise 3 crores, by the way, 1 crore will basically going off to the investor who invested 25 lakhs in me earlier. That's a red flag to an investor because he says, why is that guy not enthusiastic about your business anymore? Why does he want to exit now? Then it basically says, is there something wrong in the business or in the team or whatever? So these are some of the red flags. Not necessary that all of them have to be. I mean, as long as you have a valid reason, that's fine. But if these are things that typically will raise some alarm bells in a VC, right? Right. So then I come back to research, right? It is research. One thing that typically people miss is just research on doing which VCs to approach, right? And there are multiple cases. I mean, you go to a VC, you go speak to him, and you walk him through a product. He's very interested and stuff like that. Then after 1-2 meetings, you realize that he is an investor in a competing product, and it's happened multiple times to multiple entrepreneurs. So at the end of it, you are going and spending time and giving uh, all your traction, all of that directly on a platter to a competition. Because the VC obviously will go tell his portfolio companies. So then you are going the other aspect. You're going to a VC who has done only say consumer investments, who has only done say fintech investment, and then you're trying to pitch cybersecurity. Again, I mean, he'll take a call, maybe he'll do it, but you're wasting your time. He's wasting his time. So the other thing is you are going and pitching to say a Tiger Global today at your early stage. You know that, I mean, you should do some research saying Tiger Global doesn't come in anywhere before Series B, right? For whatever they might say, they typically don't come. And they again invest in consumer. So if you have all of that information, then it becomes a lot more easier for you to go pitch. But doing that research is very, very important, right? And especially the other aspect, it's not so much in India, but it is getting there also in India. But in the US, it's very relevant in other markets. Within VCs, what typically good entrepreneurs do is research partners. So in a VC firm, typically you'll have 3 or 4 partners, and the partners typically there'll be one deep tech guy, there'll be a fintech guy, there'll be a consumer guy, and stuff like that. Now you would want to go back and hit the guy. If you are a cyber tech startup, you want to go back and hit the cybersecurity guy who looks at cybersecurity rather than a guy who looks at fintech, because he might just take a meeting, he might transfer it internally, or he might decide saying this is not interesting for me. So that's very important. And also develop, in some way you have to go back and have a clear view saying what you want from the investor. You want capital, you want access to clients, you want say help with finding good people, you want help with product strategy. So what all can they bring to the table, right? And what typically we've seen is someone who does his homework when they come and pitch. Is like is impressive from day one, right? So it always adds significant value when people basically do their homework and come and pitch, right? The other thing is see, I mean, all of these typically VCs, right? It's look at it like don't look at it like a transaction when you're pitching to VCs, right? VCs also don't want to be evaluating you based on one meeting and deciding, right? They would want to typically know you better before you come to the actual transaction or actual investing decision. So typically VCs are more than happy to have a chat with you if needed. If you go back and write to them, say, you know what, I'm building this. I'm not raising right now, but I want to just come back and pick your brains and have a chat with you. They're more than happy to do that, right? So what we typically suggest is start interacting with them, build relationships with them. right? Even before the fundraise, right? It's difficult sometimes when you're really early stage, but even then, suppose you have the ability to go raise some capital from angels, and that will see you for the next 8 to 10 months, right? You have capital that lasts you for 8 to 10 months, right? And then you decide from month 8 onwards is when you'll start raising capital. Don't start speaking to VCs on month 8. Maybe you should start speaking to VCs on month 3, month 4 itself, right? And then that actually helps a lot because they look at what you're doing, they look at your team, they look at this, and they have a better understanding of you. Then the investment decision becomes a lot more easy. And other things I talked about, I mean, manage it like a sales process. Obviously, there's a funnel, do saying how many guys are there on top, select a few, then focus, target them, and then go on from there, right? Then the other important aspect, right, is typically leverage networks. So if you know people who have connections to VCs, leverage the network, and it works really well because it comes in through a network. They're more than happy to listen if and especially if the network is a credible person, then it becomes a lot more easier for them to go back and give you a patient hearing and understand what you're trying, right? And I think this collaboration is very important. And today you will use someone and get and speak to a VC. Tomorrow, some entrepreneur will come back and it'll be payback time for you. So I think it feeds on itself. So I wouldn't hesitate to go back and if I were a promoter, I would go back and hesitate to ask people in my network to introduce me to a VC because I also know if someone asks me, I will do the same as well, right? Uh, the most important aspect, I mean, typically, I've seen this happens a lot, especially Indian promoters. VCs say no, or they don't respond at all. Promoters say, okay, maybe they're not interested, right? But what I'd want people you to go back and do is go and ask him. Go and say, yes, I'm okay with you saying no or not responding at all. But tell me what your feedback is. Right? Just get some feedback saying why is it important, why are they not investing, what are their thoughts, because it will give you some insights into a business from a third party. Now whether you want to take it or not is different, but at least you'll get some insights, right? So that's very important. Focus on it. If you just do that, it becomes a lot more feedback that you get becomes a lot more interesting. The other thing that I do is a lot of companies in the US typically say, and I've seen this promoters do this a lot. Once they know that the VC is sort of interested or something, he says, "First, do you mind if I send you monthly updates or quarterly updates on what you're doing?" Right? So just that at least we keep that they engaged on what's happening in your business. And if they're okay, just send them a quick one mail update every month, every 3 months, and that will. And if you're doing really well, they will come back to you saying, "Oh, you seem to be growing really fast. Can we have a chat?" Right? So that's important. So these are again some of the points that I think are important from based on experience, but uh, it's it's not that you can do it's not that these are absolutely necessary, but I think it just adds a significant value when you're doing it this way, right? And lastly, so I this is moving to the next one. This is largely about the pitch and what are you pitching, right? uh, so typically what we have seen, and this is a big this thing, right? uh, you are basically one of the big aspects of founders is they come and pitch the technology, right? And while that is good, ultimately the tech by itself is not something that will go back and drive the business. It will not drive revenues, it will not drive this thing, right? So when you pitch, you should focus on the business per se. Say, this is a business that we are building. The business has, I mean, the core problem is this, the core offering is this, the core problem we're trying to solve is this. This is how the product basically solves those problems. This is how we market the product. This is the kind of GTM that we will have, and therefore this is the kind of business we are building. Each customer will pay so much, and this is the number of. So ultimately, it's a function of they're not looking at. You might have the best model, AI model in the world, right? But as long as you don't have a business story around it, it becomes very difficult for VCs to go back anyway. So that's very important from a pitch perspective. And like traction, again, if you have traction, don't be hesitant to talk about your traction. In fact, I would say upfront talk about your traction, talk about number of customers, how fast you're growing, what kind of stickiness you see in them, how much are they willing to pay, right? All of that is very important, right? Then typically, again, this takes a lot of practice, and I think.
Arun,
Sorry.
a quick question. I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
I'm interrupting. So
Yeah,
when
no,
you
no worries.
so when you say traction, right, there could be two kind of traction. One is a revenue generating traction, and there could be another traction wherein you have not even generated a revenue, but you are seeing a positive tractions while you're talking to CISOs and senior member within the organization. So is it a good idea even to capture those as well? These are not revenue converted tractions.
Yeah, no, so as long as is there a way in which you can show that CISOs love it, love the product,
Okay.
right? Love the idea, then it is reasonable, right?
Sure.
See, then the question becomes, okay, the idea seems fine. Now the next question is, can you execute it? That'll be the next question. You have to answer that. But
Yes.
still, the fact that people love it is a good tick mark. So I think you should focus on. You should basically talk about that.
Yeah, sure.
Right? What typically also you need to do is see, ultimately look at it like 3 stages that you have to get through, right? You have to have your articulation right for the first meeting, the second meeting, third meeting. And the first meeting is you don't have to basically deep dive into the product at a micro level. Can you keep it at say 10,000 feet? Still, it's 10,000 feet. Explain the offering and the value to the customers, and then go from there, right? So it's important to basically have maybe an elevator pitch is very good. Even if you get a chance meeting with a VC for say 10-15 minutes, in those 10-15 minutes, are you able to give him a very good view of your business, of what you're doing, right? That 15 minutes will then translate to a 1 hour meeting, and then you have enough content to go over in 1 hour, so that you get to the next meeting. And the next meeting, you say, okay, I'll get my tech team, we'll go back and do a detailed understanding of your product. That could be a 3-hour meeting. So you have to have your articulation right for these different kinds of interactions, right? One size fit all. I'm going to talk about my technology for 45 minutes, and only then it doesn't work, right? So that's very important. It takes a lot of practice, right? I'm typically in a incubator situation, Rajiv, maybe it's worthwhile for you to, and I'm sure you're probably doing some part of it anyway, but practicing the pitch, practicing what you say is an important aspect of pitching anyway. That's something that I think you should do, right?
Absolutely.
Right. And then, yeah, go ahead.
No, just to respond to that.
Yeah.
So we haven't had a whole lot of pitching aspects, but some of the at least more growth stage or the ones that have had business revenue traction. So we've had opportunities to present to a couple of forums, but then, in the next couple of sessions, we are going to specifically focus on this pitching aspect. And I think this particular session has been fantastic. So I should say that at this point. I mean, a lot of it, what you're saying, is very practical advice. A lot of it is human psychology. How does it work? It's not just sort of a business transaction, right? Like you said. I think this is fantastic. But yeah, your point is taken. I think the startups here and even the others should get into, I think, who was it? Mohit was the one who was asking the question about, sending updates, non-revenue traction, right? So I think a lot of, Arun, what you're saying is, to summarize, is also treating this interaction with the VCs or with the investors as, looking at it from a very human perspective, right?
Correct.
You can go ahead and talk only about yourself, or talk about the technology that you're passionate about, but ultimately, it is a give and take, right? The other person should be invested in what you're doing, right? And there could be, things that are not interesting for the part for the firm. There could be things that are premature. It could not be the right timing. So I think all these are different points that will factor into the pitching aspect.
Right. Yeah. agree. Yeah, it's important. I mean, it takes especially most. And I'm just making I'm generalizing a little bit, and I'm just saying. But culturally, we are not. I would say we are not tuned to do that, right? I mean, we are not tuned to be. Treat it more like a transaction. So it takes some amount of shifting, especially for us. I mean, I'm talking about Indians in general. It takes some amount of this thing to go back and do it slightly differently, but it's not very difficult, right? I mean, it's just a mental thing. You need to switch on and switch off, and then switch it on, and then you can go from there, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think on that topic, one aspect that I have noticed is, in general, from a cultural perspective, right? If you compare the East and the West, I mean, a big aspect of what we value a lot, what is treated as something very good here, is the whole concept of humility, right? And that sort of reflects in the pitch as well. Is what I've seen. A lot of times I've seen founders undersell themselves, and there are extremes as well, right? So in a pitch, people tend to oversell, or if you're very humble about what you're doing, you tend to undersell. So it's finding the right balance and being very genuine about what you are, where you are, what are you building, what are your goals. Because ultimately, this investor, be it a VC or a friend or a family, they are a long-term partner.
Exactly. Yeah.
Business, right? Either financially or for an impact, from a social perspective or anything. So I think the genuineness aspect, being genuine, is going to be critical.
Correct. Yeah. That's very important. Yeah. In fact, I used to, think of it like someone who's going to be there as a part of your company for the next 7 years, whether you like it or not, right? And who has significant authority in terms of what direction your company goes. So it is like, in some ways, it's like a marriage for a long period. So treat it that way. I mean, you just can't try and wing your way through the first 4 meetings, lie or whatever, and be untruthful, and then expect that the relationship to continue working that way. So that's very important. A very good point, Rajiv. So that's something that people have to keep in mind. Right? Couple of things I'll just point out in this, right? Especially from what experience I have, right? People tend to underplay competition, right? And that's very important. That's a big warning sign. We come back and say, you know what, those guys don't know how to do this, or those guys will not do this, right? They're large companies, but they will not do this. Now you can come back and say, you know what, they can definitely do it if they chose to. But we have some advantages in terms of being nimble, being fast, and this might not be their focus area. We'll continue to do. We can go back and still build a business while they're looking somewhere else. That's a more reasonable answer. But to say someone like a large company cannot do what you're doing, and I am the best, right? Unless there is some hard conviction behind it, I would be careful about making statements like that, because people, what I think, tend to underplay competition significantly. Though they will not do. And maybe they're right, but the way to do it is the way to come back and answer that is something that you have to keep in mind, right? The other aspect of it, especially when it comes to deep tech place, I know you're building something that is most founders are, especially the deep tech side, they're building something which is from a technology perspective is far superior in most cases, right? But having said that, when you're pitching, it's important for you to demystify, de-jargonize the whole this thing, right? Because you look at it from a pure VC. I mean, the VCs, they could be generalists, they could be specialists. But if you're pitching, a specialist might understand. A specialist, deep tech, cybersecurity focused guy might understand what you're building. Or they're few and far in between, right? In all probability, if you raise VC capital as well, you will end up with generalists who still believe in what you're doing, right? And for them, they need to be comfortable with what you're building at a business level. So, and they need to be able to understand. They need to be able to go back and say, okay, I understand what you're building. I might not know the intricacies of the technology, but this is largely the use case. This is largely how the business will be built. So it's very important for you to give them that comfort. And I think that's, so in some ways your pitch has to go back and accommodate that. Now you could have different levels of it. If you're pitching to a cybersecurity expert, someone who's built a cybersecurity business, then you can increase ratchet up because obviously he knows the domain. But it's a judgment call. You need to go back and be able to have a demystified, de-jargonized version that you have as well that you're pitching.
And all VCs, correct me if I'm wrong, Arun.
Yeah.
So all VCs, before they put in any significant amount of money,
Yeah.
will do a technology due diligence. So even if they don't have a partner, and this deep tech moves really fast, right? So they will do a technical due diligence. They will get a subject matter expert, and that person, things just shooting acronyms like deep learning, AI, ML sprinkled all over. So that person will shoot it down, right? And they'll see that. This goes back to being genuine. Is very applicable in deep tech because unless you are really using, I'm taking machine learning as an example. Unless you're using really machine learning and deep learning matters, you're not just using, a naive Bayes classifier or a simple logistic regression. The subject matter expert is going to get back and say, these guys are saying ML. It looks fancy on a slide. Maybe it's a good sales pitch to a customer, but underneath it, it's all hollow, right? So I think that goes back to that.
Yeah, definitely. And most VCs understand also that, right? You might have the most sophisticated model that you built also, right? But do you have enough data to go back and show the model works? Has it been demonstrated live situation? Or do you have access to kind of data? The client, does he have access to kind of data? So a lot of these questions are something that you need answer to. Just by saying you have this most superior model doesn't cut it. Similarly, again, like you pointed out, they will get someone, either they'll have a CTO, they'll have an advisory CTO who will come in and anyway speak to you on the tech. So that part of it will be covered. So I don't see a reason why you should go back and unless you have a very strong product and you want to make a point, I'd be this thing about. Anyway, it's a good practice to go back and de-jargonize and just not talk about purely tech, right? It's in some way saying, do you make an assessment call saying how much of technology does he understand, and then you ratchet up and down your pitch accordingly, right? Yeah. And then the other two aspects, and this is very subtle, right? It is okay to say I don't know in a VC pitch, right? Because obviously they'll come back and ask, okay, what do you see yourself in the next 5 years? Do you see this business scaling to this? Do you see you getting into, say, adjoining areas? Do you see yourself developing something else? You'd say, okay, I don't know. I don't know answers to this, but obviously as a part of the journey, I'll figure it out. It's perfectly okay answer, right? Sometimes people say they hesitate to say I don't know, right? But that's not what you should be doing. Say I don't know, but I'll figure it out, right? If it's important, I'll go figure it out. So that's very this thing. And they also see in this journey, right? Both the VCs and you should say there's a large unknown. In the next 5-6 years, you're going to build something, right? There will be multiple cases where you go down on a path, it is not working. You come back, change, pivot, go try something else, right? So VCs they are cognizant of the fact that there will be multiple things like this on the way. You decide you want to go sell in the US. You struggle, you do something for the next 1.5 years, you realize that it's not working. You might come back and say, you know what, let me focus on Southeast Asia instead, or vice versa, right? So they are also evaluating for your flexibility, you're willing to adapt, you're willing to go back and change things, change directions mid-course, all of that. So this is again an important aspect for you while you're presenting to say, if you can say not be very, if you can show flexibility in the way you're presenting, in the way you're talking about things, then it becomes a big tick mark. And if people think you're very rigid and you're not open to anything new, and you have one formula and only go there, then it's a big red flag for VC. So that's something that you need to go back and think about. And largely, one thing that's very important, and it's something that I see a lot in India as well, is first of all, understand what kind of terms, what typically is the relationship you're getting into. So maybe Raju, will be a good idea to basically do one specific session on typical terms that are there in any kind of VC kind of this thing and what it means, right? Maybe you should get, I mean, if you have someone who can, from a legal perspective, talk to entrepreneurs, because I think it's very important. People don't understand the stuff around what is the kind of contractual relationship you're getting into.
Correct.
Okay.
We did, Arun, we did have
Yeah.
the previous session was from the founders, from the team from Algo
Yeah.
Legal.
Right.
So
Okay.
we did have and come and talk about the general sort of legal aspects. I didn't think we got into specifics of term sheets and all that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. At some point of time, maybe depending upon the stage, it's important for founders to know. And what I also realize is a couple of things. I'll not talk about each point the same generic thing. Right? Founders tend to underestimate this, underestimate the legal aspects of it. Right? But I that's a definite no for me, because ultimately, if these are important aspects that surround your business, and you should know at least at a high level what contractually it means, what it means from a business perspective, and what it means from what kind of things you can do and what you cannot do, right? So that's very important. So I would actually, if there's a team of co-founders, I would want one of them to take responsibility for this and understand this in detail, and then use this and be the person that they are working with when it comes to either contracting with a VC or whatever. Right? Again, something that we typically see is don't try and penny pinch on legal advice. Right? People say, okay, I have someone, you do it for free. But at the end of the day, if you're not giving you good advice, the impact of that will last for the next 6-7 years of your business. You don't want to get in a situation like that. Or you might give up something that ideally you shouldn't be giving up to a VC in terms of contract clause or whatever. So sometimes it is to be penny wise and pound foolish sometimes doesn't work here. Right? The other aspect of it is compliance. A lot of people say, I have a CA, I have a chartered accountant to take care of everything. But you realize that India, unfortunately, is a very, very high on compliance kind of geography. You need to have multiple compliances. All of these will go back and affect you in some form or other when you're scaling up. So pay attention to that. Have a good guy who will basically help you with all the compliances, because all of these is something that people will do a due diligence on before they invest. At least when a larger check comes in and a larger, more organized VC comes in, they will do a detailed due diligence on. And there are many cases where I have seen the VCs very interested in the business, they like the founders, all of that. But they walked away from a deal because the books are in a mess. Compliance is very bad and stuff like that. So that's something that you need to be very careful about. You need to have good people looking at it, right? And lastly, this is just generic advice, right? People, I mean, there's this thing about valuation, and there's this thing about this whole notion about my company is valued at X in the seed round, and my other company is valued at say X minus 30%, right? And this whole nature about this thing about valuation. But in reality, valuation doesn't mean a thing in the early stage company, right? Because ultimately it says all it means is this: the business needs say X amount of dollars for it to reach to a particular milestone, and on the other hand, the VC wants to have X percentage ownership. So if you decide that the business needs around an investments of say 10 crores in the next 2-3 years, and the VC needs a minimum of 10% ownership, right? Your valuation becomes say say how much is that? 10 crores, 10%, so it becomes 100 crores. Whereas if the VC basically says your business needs 10 crores of revenue of investment in the next 2 years, and the VC typically needs 25% ownership, right? Then you are basically your valuation is say 40 crores, right? The same business, depending upon how much equity the VC is you're giving up to the VC, the valuation number will change, right? For the same amount of investment. So it doesn't make sense. If you look at it, the business is not valued differently. It is just that someone wants to have a higher share versus a lower share of the business for the amount of money you're raising. So to that extent, a lot of founders I say are very valuation centric. No, I will not basically take in money at say this valuation. I'll only do it at this valuation. I mean, I understand there has to be some sort of a cutoff. You're not obviously going to you build something or you have something that's of value in terms of even the thought process to build a business, and you have the capability. So investors should value that. But being very first on valuation is sometimes missing the boat, right? And then, like I said, valuation early stage is just a number. It's just a number saying depending. It's a number that's derived from how much money the business needs and how much equity the investor is willing to take. I think of it like this: it is not a winner take all kind of thing, right? Ultimately, even if even a VC comes in at a lower valuation, or you basically are able to get him at a higher valuation, both of you are betting on the fact that whatever valuation he comes in will grow to say 10x or 20x in the next 5-6 years, right? That's the way I would want people to look at it, rather than saying, yeah, at this point of time, am I giving up too much, right? And so it's a mental shift. So that's something that I wanted to go back and think about. Largely, this is what I thought I'll cover in general. Now, I'll pause here. We can also cover the Indian landscape. I don't have specific slides on that, but I can cover the Indian landscape and the tech landscape as well. Right? I'll pause here. Any questions?
Hi, Arun. This is Ashish here from Saizen. I have a quick question.
Yeah, Ashish.
It's about the ROI that the friends and family or the seed fund, seed ventures or even other Series A ventures. What kind of ROIs they look at? You mentioned 10 times to 20 times or something in 5 years or something. For each of them, how does it vary? If you can shed some light there. Hello.
Yeah, Ashish, we heard your question. Arun?
No, sorry. I by mistake had pressed mute. Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. So okay. My answer to that is, so friends and family and all that. Typically, I don't think there is a very established return expectation, right? Typically, if you look at friends and family around, you say they know you, they trust you, they know that you are good at something. They also trust you to go back and build something out of value. So they will come in. So as long as they know that you're not going to be cheating them of their money and you have a good reputation, I think largely as long as you give them a reasonable return, I think they're okay. It is not so much a financial investment for friends and family as much as it is saying, okay, I know you and you do well, right? So that's typically the motive is, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
But having said that, seed investors typically will come in and they will have an expectation of basically you being able to build out a large business. Now, I'll tell you, is the nature of the seed investing is typically saying the risk in really early stage like seed is much higher, because the idea might not start off at all. It might not basically get to a product at all. It might not get to say beyond 2-3 customers at all. So to that extent, their ability to take risks is much higher compared to a Series A. A Series A investor will come back and say, you know what, you're doing regular revenues, you have 20 clients, all of them are paying you so much. So now it's a question of pumping in money into sales and marketing and some amount of product and scaling from there, right? Whereas a seed investor is looking at question whether this product will take off at all, right? So the return expectation for the seed is much higher, but they are also okay with, on the other hand, they're also okay with the business not taking off and a complete failure, right? So that's the nuance I want to go back and give you. Does that answer your question, Ashish?
Yes. But if you have, I think we can discuss it further later. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
And to add to that, Arun, I think the scale you had earlier, right, where you go from the chain rather, where it's friends, family, and then you're having angels and syndicates and all that. So the risk to reward expectations, I think, follows a bit the graph over there. And I think maybe also a word of caution is also that friends and family are the 3 Fs. Maybe the third F is an exception, but friends and family, like you said, it's a financial investment, yes, from a startup perspective, but there's also an emotional investment, right? So they are, I mean, there is what is at stake is not just their money, but also the relationship part. And there are numerous examples of how friends and family invest, but they don't. I mean, if everything works out, the best case scenario is fantastic. Everybody is happy, celebrates, all that is good. But when things don't work out, then friends and family are also typically less business savvy in general. So it'll be harder to, for startups to explain the nuances of why their, go to market, why their deep tech was a failure or things like that, right? So there is a caveat over there. So they might not mind you giving back just 1x after 5 years, fantastic. But if it becomes less, then it's harder to explain to them. I don't know if you have more thoughts on that.
Correct. Yeah, I would agree. I mean, typically, I mean, it boils down to the promoter, right? I mean, if you're taking money from friends, and obviously your friends, family, right? A lot of people have this thing. It takes in friends and family say, okay, I would rather lose investor money, but I will give something back to my friends and family. So I agree. I mean, because it's emotional, because they're investing in you in this thing, right? People would tend to return them some capital. And lots of times I've seen also promoters come back and say in the series later rounds, series A, series B round, get friends and family exited, at least get the capital back, right? And then whatever growth is there beyond that is fine. But is there a way you can get them exited early? So to that extent, the capital preserved and stuff like that. Yeah.
And then this reinforces what you said earlier about keeping a very good book. So just because it is friends and family, please do not make it informal. Make sure that everything is right. All your cap table is all very clean, because always assume the best case, right? Assume that if you're a cybersecurity company, you have a potential, you have the drive to become a McAfee, Symantec, or CrowdStrike. Because it's only when you reach that stage that all these internal differences start mattering. So I'm sure all of us have seen the Social Network movie. Because if you don't reach that, then nobody's worried, right? People don't come to you. I mean, so anyway, and
the problem, Rajiv, exactly your point, right? And if at all you reach that, you have the potential to reach that stage, and you start reaching it, but you are being pulled down by simple things like you not had a compliance, you not had your books clean, then it's a very sad thing to happen, right? Because in some ways it's a worst outcome. Because you can basically become a large business, but someone has stopped investing in you and you're not able to scale because you did some stupid thing, say 2-3 years ago. We didn't take care of stuff. So that's the worst thing.
And some of these things are not retroactively. You can't go and fix them.
Yeah, you can't go and fix them. Correct.
You will have to change the company, and then you lose the vintage and a lot of branding aspects. Then you have the negative aspects as well.
Right. I agree.
So Arun, I mean, this has been, I think, a wealth of practical, sort of straight from the heart VC advice, right? And from the benefit of the startups, right? So I think we have just about 10 minutes left in this session.
Yeah.
So let's see if there are any other questions that the startups have. If not, I have a couple myself, but
sure.
Yeah, Rajiv, Arun, John here. So just a quick question I'd like to put across. Throwing back on the aspect of what we were discussing earlier on the exit plan.
Correct.
Now, if you can throw a little more light on the exit plan or the exit clauses that as a founder we should be keeping in mind. I mean, I understand you did give a quick brief on that, but I think if you can get some light, what all things should be kept in mind in terms of the exit plan, that's going to be very helpful.
So I'll probably tell you quickly what are the kind of clauses that exit clauses are there in a typical VC, and what kind of contract, what kind of things that the VC has. And then if that doesn't answer your question, then we can debate more. So typically, when you look at a VC kind of contract, right, there with largely pertinent exit, there's some 3-4 clauses which I think everyone should be aware of. First is basically saying a typical VC will basically come back and say that I'm investing this money into you, right, into a business. And if things don't go well, right, if for example someone is investing 2 crores, 3 crores in you, and at some point of time things don't go well, you basically have some company that this thing, and there is a sale of the company, right? The VC will have first preference over basically getting the 2 crores out of the amount, his investment, right? And then the remaining will get split among the shareholders. So this is typically called liquidation preferences, right? And liquidation preferences, sometimes it's a ratio of saying if the VC invest X, it'll be 1x. The VC invest X, in some contracts you'll have 2x. So the VC basically gets 2 times the investment. And after that, the proceeds get distributed among the shareholders. So that's something that is there in exit clause, right? The other exit clauses, standard exit clauses are the VC will, if you are basically selling your majority stake, or if you are selling to someone else, right, the promoter is selling his stake to someone else, and the VC will say, if you are going, I want also to go at the same price. I don't want to be left in a company where the promoter himself is going, right? So that's called tag. Then typically there are clauses which are related to the VC decides that this business is not doing very well. There's an acquisition offer on the table, and stuff like that. And the VC will obviously say the VC can drag you. And in some ways, all of these are protection for the things not turning out well, right? The VC can drag you to an acquisition offer. So that's called a drag right. The VC will have the ability to say, provided these conditions happen, or these things conditions don't happen, the VC has the right to do a drag. So this is again one more related exit clause, right? And obviously, apart from that, a typical financial investor will have consent rights on the board. The board consent rights will be related to saying if there is he will have a vote, and he will have a veto on some aspects. Like tomorrow, you want to stop this business and go on, right? He will have a veto on that, saying no, till we basically find a buyer, then we will continue to do this, or till we do. So there are exit clauses, largely liquidation preference, voting rights, and tag along, drag along are all exit. Also, there's some things which are overarching, which also play in the form in times of exit, which are typically investor voting rights. So these are things that you should sort of be careful about. Does that answer your question, or your question is more on expectations of exit?
I think it surely answers my question, but I think the expectations of VC will be very helpful as well.
Yeah. So expectation of VC, like I said, right? VCs typically do a benchmark. So if you are getting into a company on a valuation, if you just go back, I'll just go back to my example. Sorry, screen is frozen. But if you go back to the earlier example, the VC is investing 10 crores at a valuation of 50 crores, right? If the VC expects a 10x multiple, and they will do some math, right? 10x multiple, then they see your business growing from a 50 valuation to a 500 crore valuation. That means your revenue has to grow to that extent, right? And your business has to grow to that extent. So that's the kind of expectation they will do a mental math, right? From a expectation perspective, right? So it need not be, I mean, you just can't, every VC looking at they'll only invest whether, as long as there is at least in their heads a 10x to a 15x 10x to a 12x multiple, right? Typical 3x 5x might not interest typical VCs, but beyond that they will still hope that beyond that also there is a significant upside there, but the minimum they look at is around a 10x kind of multiple that they get. And that too, it's all of these is a function of time, right? 10x over 20 years, is just maybe not worth it. I mean, it has to be 10x over the period of say 6 to 7 years. So all of these again, time becomes an important factor into this.
Sure, that's great.
Yeah.
Hello.
Okay.
Hi,
Yeah.
Arun.
Yeah.
I have a question, actually two questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
As an Indian VC, what are the three aspects of cybersecurity startup that we should be focused upon? Like what they look for. If you can just tell these three things, it will be really helpful. And I would
Right.
also like to know, like most of the Indian VCs, they look for app-based product companies. It is very easy to execute and scale them. But when it comes to the cybersecurity companies, if I can get some list of VCs who are focused on only cybersecurity businesses, that will be grateful.
Yeah. So let me quickly cover that. I think good question on that. So the landscape in India for deep tech VCs is very, very nascent, right? It is still evolving. There are very few guys who actually do deep tech investments. I
Right.
can name 5 or 6 funds who do that.
Mhm.
Having said that, there are a few more who are starting to come up now. But having said that, 3-4 years ago there was zero. So to that extent, they still, the fact that there's some 5 or 6 itself is a good thing for the ecosystem, right? Right. So and maybe what I can do is I can share with Rajiv a list of names of funds who probably look at a deep tech place, and then you can go back and circulate that, right? So now within deep tech also, they focus on multiple aspects of deep tech, right? So I don't think there's no firm in India that is so focused on cybersec, right? They do deep tech, they do space, they do robotics, they do virtual reality, they do immersive technology. They do, some of them actually focus on med tech, on healthcare. So deep tech is a very broad umbrella. Cybersecurity perspective, there might be few guys who look at it, who actually also look at cybersecurity, but they're few and far in between. In terms of fundraising, the way I would think is a much better, much bigger option is, and if you know the story of Lucidis, right? As long as you are catering to a global market and you have a global product, my advice to a lot of people would be, think about setting up a company, a presence in either Singapore or US, and try and raise capital from there, because their access to capital for these places is much higher, much better compared to India. But having said that, I'm hoping that in the next 3-4 years that will also change. We'll see.
Okay. And what are the three characteristics that you look for when it comes to the like how can we catch the attention of VC?
Yeah, so as long as, I mean, we talked about this, right? As long as the idea is, let me just go back to that slide. You talked about, right, large addressable market.
Yes.
Right. And is there some definite product moat or some moat that you have intrinsically in terms of your offering, in some ways that very few people, the other competition does not have. Sorry. And your ability to execute that. Right. So you might have a great product, but do you have the ability to sell it and become a business? These are the three important things that I would go back and look at it, right? And in the cybersecurity world, again, see, all of this, it's a very cluttered world, right? Is there a niche that you can go back and create and occupy that and become the leading player in that? That also might be of interest.
And Arun, here,
yeah,
I think so my response to that, Ms. Nanda, is that cybersecurity is just like any other deep tech or any other business. I mean, definitely from a VC perspective, right? So I would go back to the 4 T's, as I like to call it. And Arun mentioned, right? So you have traction, you have TAM, which is a total addressable market. Then you have technology and team. So if you have traction, then nothing else matters, right? The VC is going to see that you have, whatever, 100 crores revenue in 6 months, or whatever the ARR is, or growth rate year-on-year, things like that. Then nothing else matters, right? They typically do not care about the other factors because you're showing traction. But if you don't have the traction, right? If you're a little early, right, then you will have to convince them about the other aspects, which is, okay, how big is the market, right? And that might play in different ways. It might have to be a really big market, or it can be a very niche that starts out but is large in the global scale. And then if you don't have that, then you might have to complement that along with your team and justify that, okay, you don't have, or let's say technology, right? You plan to address this market, but with what technology you have to convince them. And that's where I think a lot of the cybersecurity guys tend to focus only on, but that is not enough. And if you still are very early building out the technology, then you have to convince them about your team, right? About the people and the expertise who will build this technology, who will address this market, who will get this traction. So ultimately, it still boils down to the 4 Ps.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. Right.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. No, you're welcome. Yeah. Great. Any other questions? Yeah. So largely, I mean, this is the slide I was trying to get to. Large addressable, largely what Rajiv talked about, right? I mean, when I say promoter mindset ambition, largely it also the other aspect of it is team. So these are the 3-4 things that are key for VCs.
All right.
Okay. Great.
Any other final questions before we end the session? Otherwise, I will. Arun, if you have a couple of the VCs in India that invest in deep tech, I think they're all. I don't believe there are any cybersecurity centric VCs. They might have invested in a couple, but if you have those and if you can share them, then I'll be happy to circulate it with the startups here.
Yeah, sure. We'll do that. Give me till I just have some stuff to do later on today, and give me till Monday, and I'll drop you a mail.
Okay, no problem. So with that, thank you very much, Arun. I think this was like fantastic, very practical advice, very realistic advice. Coming from a VC, very actionable advice, I would say. Right, things that cover everything from when to approach the VCs, how to approach the VCs, why not to approach the VCs, how do you do it, all those aspects. So this was, I think, very, very enlightening to me and hopefully to the startups as well. So thank you again for all the, for all the effort and the time you put in.
Hey, no. Yeah, no worries, Rajiv. Appreciate you calling me, happy to be here and speak to you guys. Right? More than happy to more than happy for any one of you to reach me and have a chat as well if needed. Rajiv, maybe you can even share my email and they can write to me, and more than happy to have a chat individually if needed.
Okay,
that'd
be great. So I will do that. I shall share it with them and take it from
there. Great.
All right. Thank you all. So we'll stop recording this meeting and we'll put it on our website for others who couldn't make it.
Sure.
So thanks again, Arun, and
thanks.
Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you very much, Arun.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Bye.
See you.